3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Welcome to Roots of Reality. I am your host, Ben Baumann, and today I'm going to be talking about Phase 9. I came, I saw, I conquered. So starting about 2,300 years ago, we have the emergence of these huge empires. No longer are rulers just satisfied with controlling their kingdom or even their region, but now they want more because they want to control the entire world known to them. And they want to spread their power and culture all over the world. This story ultimately begins in Macedonia, where the king of Macedonia, Philip II, begins his conquest of Greece, bringing powerful Greek states like Athens and Sparta under his control. And this conquest by Philip II was really just the start of what would become the Macedonian Empire. The Macedonian Empire would really form and become truly powerful under Philip's son, actually, the famous Alexander the Great, who was a military genius, a lover of Greek culture, and a student of the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. So with this knowledge, it is very important to stress that Alexander the Great was a big fan of Greek culture and embraced it very heavily and wanted to create a Greek culturally based empire. So from here, Alexander the Great would do something no one had ever been able to do before, which was conquer the powerful and very large Persian Empire, in turn creating one of the largest empires ever, which included the Mediterranean, the Balkans, Egypt, part of the Middle East, Central Asia, and India. And as a result of his conquests, Alexander purposefully integrated the peoples he conquered, having his soldiers, for example, marry local women from the Persian Empire and other places, with essentially the goal of creating this diverse mix of Macedonian, Greek, and Persian culture, essentially creating some new culture. Now, this would ultimately fail after his death, and his entire empire would fall apart, breaking into various kingdoms, but his Greek influence would stay everywhere he went. For example, in the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, which formed in Central Asia, encompassing places like modern-day Uzbekistan, and after Alexander the Great died, they started to dress like Alexander the Great and ultimately wanted to create an image of themselves as the rightful successor of Alexander, and they would continue to spread that Greek culture for generations after Alexander the Great's death. And at the end of the day, this spread of Greek culture from Alexander to his successors throughout his empire would go on to greatly influence what would become the Roman Empire. So now we turn to the Roman Empire, which would actually begin as a democratic republic about 2,500 years ago, even before the time of Alexander the Great. And this Roman Republic had a separation of powers, providing a representative democracy, which was run by Roman social elites. And as a republic, the Romans would conquer their bitter rival Carthage, which was led by the famous commander of Carthage, Hannibal. So after the Romans conquered Carthage and after Alexander the Great died, the Romans would inherit a lot of these Greek ideas because they would go on to conquer Greece and Macedonia, controlling the entire Mediterranean region. And so the Roman Republic basically picked up the pieces of what was Alexander's empire and were greatly influenced by Greek ideas and absorbed it, creating this Greco-Roman philosophy when it came to their culture. And this would become the new culture that was being spread across the world. And the Roman Republic would continue its expansion throughout much of Western Europe, led by the famous general Julius Caesar, who conquered the Gauls, which was a powerful tribe throughout Western Europe, and this gave Rome control of much of Western Europe. And at this time, the Roman Empire was actually involved in a civil war while Julius Caesar was abroad fighting the Gauls. and he would actually come back to Rome and then win the Civil War as well. Later, though, Julius Caesar would end up being assassinated by a coup against his rule. However, his nephew, Augustus, would end up defeating this coup and become the new leader of Rome. And under Augustus, the Roman Republic would officially end, as Augustus would follow the steps towards an empire that Julius Caesar created when he established himself as dictator after the Civil War. And Augustus would take that one step further by officially making the Roman Empire exist, putting an end to the democratic Roman Republic. However, though, he still did not have 100% control of the empire, because despite the fact that he had more power than any other Roman ruler before him, the Roman Senate still existed, which still had influence in the empire. And from here, the Roman Empire would go on to conquer Hispania, meaning what is modern-day Spain and Portugal, as well as Britain and parts of Africa, specifically in North Africa, and thus heavily influencing a large chunk of the world, spreading Greek and Roman culture via colonization, conquest, and trade. And the Roman Empire would last until about 1,543 years ago to the year 476, until the empire would eventually be destroyed. Now, despite the fall of the Roman Empire, the Greek and Roman legacy would live on, playing a significant role in the shaping of the world we call home today. And this is especially true when it comes to government, education, science, architecture, technology, law, literature, and language, all of which have been greatly influenced by what is called the Greco-Roman world. For example, government, obviously the idea of democracy and the structure of modern-day democracy, where you have a representative democracy, meaning elected officials that make decisions on behalf of the people. Also, science and education and just knowledge in general from the Greco-Roman world have been incredibly influential on modern-day society. For example, when it comes to the science, many scientific ideas that we have today were first thought about in ancient Greece and expanded on in ancient Rome when it comes to understanding the universe or medicine or biology. Also, education, the first schools started in ancient Greece. And when it comes to just knowledge in general, if you think about all the different Greek philosophies coming from Plato and Aristotle and later Roman philosophers, these things have all been incredibly influential on society as well in the modern world and its development. Next, when it comes to architecture, especially in Western Europe, of course, but also this takes place in a lot of different places around the world as well. You see lots of Greco-Roman style architecture when it comes to buildings and government buildings especially. And in terms of language also, many languages in the Western world especially have significant influence from Latin, which was used by the Roman Empire. And Latin was influenced by Greek. Thus, the main goal of this phase is to understand that though we can look at these conquests as these harsh, terrible things that happen where cultures were being destroyed by others and being ultimately replaced, at the same time, though, this was the way of the world. We have to understand this was normal for the time. What was unique about the Roman Empire and the Macedonian Empire by Alexander the Great was just how powerful they became and how effective they were in conquering different parts of the world to create an empire and a sphere of influence that had never happened before. And so the Macedonian Empire under Alexander the Great and the Roman Empire really changed the world. And without those conquests, how the world would develop today would likely be very different. So, like always, thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to write a review. Definitely follow Roots of Reality on social media. Feel free to ask any questions you have. And remember, as always, 13.8 billion years